I mentioned yesterday that Shohei Ohtani may actually be available in a trade this offseason, even though it isn't getting talked about a lot at this point in time. And I also made the point that the most comparable scenario was when the Red Sox traded Mookie Betts to the Dodgers. So we're going to take a closer look at that Mookie Betts trade to figure out what it would take for the Giants to possibly trade for Shohei Ohtani if he was made available. We'll get into all of that and more next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And where we start is just kind of revisiting this point. I got some feedback isn't the word I'm looking for, but reaction to when I mentioned a possible Shohei Ohtani trade. And I want to preface this again, like I did yesterday, by saying I don't think ultimately the Angels will trade Shohei Ohtani, but it is something that is going to be talked about more as the offseason unfolds, simply because Ohtani is 1 year away from free agency. And the Angels are not competitive. And if they can't extend him, then the right thing to do would probably be to trade him. This is exactly the scenario that took place in Boston with Mookie Betts. Great player in his prime, 1 year from free agency, projected to earn about $30 million, which is exactly what Shohei Ohtani is going to earn in his last year of team control as well. It's like, to me, it's a almost direct comparison. Now, some of the pushback I got was from some arguing that it's like Mookie Betts plus an ace pitcher, which is not necessarily the case because while Shohei Ohtani is an incredible bat and an incredible arm, when he's hitting, he's generally the DH. And so you can't really compare him to a Mookie Betts or anybody else who's a great hitter who also plays the field. Now you might be thinking, sure you can because he's also a pitcher, but he's not a pitcher for all those games when he's out there just hitting. He's a DH. And so it's more like comparing a great designated hitter. It's more like combining a great designated hitter and a great pitcher, which is an incredibly valuable player. I am sitting here saying he's the most talented baseball player in the world because he can do something that nobody else can do. And then in terms of value, he's one of the most valuable players in the game, if not the most valuable, just projecting forward. We're talking, when you combine the hitting and the pitching, it's just an incredibly valuable package. But Mookie Betts, a couple years, 1 year removed from when he was, 1 year prior to when he was traded, had a similarly productive season for the Red Sox. And so I actually do think, and again, I mentioned this the other day too, but arbitration is based on kind of comparable players. And so the fact that Shohei Ohtani is going to make $30 million in his last arbitration year in 2023. The Angels and he settled on $30 million, avoiding arbitration. And Mookie Betts's MLB Trade Rumors projection going into that final year of arbitration eligibility was like $27.7 million or 27 point something million dollars. And then, adjust for inflation a little bit, and it's almost exactly the same amount. And so that just goes to show you, he's not twice as valuable as Mookie Betts was. So it is actually, Mookie Betts at the time was considered one of the best players in the game, arguably the best. It was a debate, Mike Trout or Mookie Betts, who's better? And right now we're having that same debate with Shohei Ohtani. Is he the best player in the game? Certainly the most talented, but is he the most valuable? He's one of them. So the point is, it is similar. And what the Red Sox gave up to get Mookie Betts was, let's see, they gave up Alex Verdugo, or excuse me, what the Dodgers gave up to get Mookie Betts. They gave up Alex Verdugo, Jeter Downs, Connor Wong, and they took on David Price, who was owed 3 years, $96 million, and they took on half of the money. So they took David Price and agreed to pay him 3 years, $48 million. So Alex Verdugo was a young outfielder who was kind of blocked on the Dodgers, so it made him expendable to LA. And he had 5 years of team control remaining. He wasn't like a super high upside prospect per se, but he was someone who had a really high floor, and we knew that he was going to be something, but probably not great, but good with the Red Sox. And then Jeter Downs at the time Fangraphs ranked him 47th on their top 100 prospects list at the time. Connor Wong was kind of a versatile catcher who wasn't a top 100 prospect. So it really wasn't that great of a package that the Dodgers gave up to get Mookie Betts. And this got people riled up at the time, saying that it wasn't enough for Mookie Betts. But this is what I keep trying to argue, is that when a player is 1 year away from free agency, their price is just significantly lower. It's very logical to think about this. Imagine, a month goes by into the season, the price would be a little bit lower. How about 2 months in, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months? What if you're only getting Shohei Ohtani for 1 month, right? The price goes down the less time you have control over the player. So from the Dodgers' perspective, the plan all along was to acquire Mookie Betts, and when the player's not a free agent, you have exclusive negotiating rights you can try to extend the player if you want, but only if the player plays for you. You can't do it when they play for somebody else. And so they paid the price to bring Mookie Betts into their organization for at least a year, and then made every effort to extend him, which they ultimately did. It ended up being like a 13-year, $365 million contract. That's off the top of my head. 12,365. Apologies. 12,365 for Mookie Betts, which is only an average of $25.6 million per year. So I have this argument with the people all the time. Longer the term, the lower the AAV. 25.6 isn't one of the top AAVs ever handed out. People say, oh, how come Max Scherzer can get $43 million and Aaron Judge, they're only offering him $30 million a year? It's preposterous. Well, no, because they're offering a longer term to Aaron Judge. And for Betts, it's 12 years. And so it wasn't $40 million a year. It's only 25.6. Bryce Harper, similar story. So anyway, what would it look like for the Giants to match this package that the Dodgers gave up to get Mookie Betts? Because, again, we don't know if Shohei Ohtani will be traded. I would certainly lean against it, but it's probably going to be something that comes up in earnest this offseason. It's going to be like, we either need to extend him as the Angels or we need to trade him. I think that conversation is going to happen as we get into the offseason here. So what would that comparable package look like from the Giants? We'll get to that in just a second. But first, BetOnline.net is the number one source, for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game you can find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting, up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. One of my favorite things that BetOnline does is these odds in terms of where free agents are going to land. It's something we've been focused on. Just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about these odds for Trey Turner, Aaron Judge. I mean, looking at where Aaron Judge is going to land according to these odds, it's such an interesting exercise for a number of reasons. Number one, if you think maybe the Giants, this is the year that they strike and they sign one of these big free agents, I think based on the odds we saw, there are some opportunities to take advantage of it. And so it's something we're going to be paying attention to. How do the lines move as rumors swirl? It's just a lot of fun. So head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. All right, as promised, we are going to continue discussing the Shohei Ohtani hypothetical. This is something that we may get into more and more as the offseason goes on if it comes out that the Angels are open to trading him. So I'm just going to continue to place these caveats in here, which is that while it may be the smart thing to do to trade him, you're giving up more than just the talent when you're trading Shohei Ohtani. You're getting more than just the talent when you're acquiring Shohei Ohtani. There's all the fans who show up to games to see this guy play in Anaheim is a big deal, and all the marketing and just attention that you get, and financially you just reap in so many rewards from having this guy on your team and an interest in your team. There's just so many benefits. He's just that marketable of a player and that good of a player and that good of a person, it seems, as well. So there's so much to like about Shohei Ohtani. And actually what triggered this episode for me today was this mailbag question from Sebastian and Katie, who say, Sebastian says your 2023 dream starting lineup and rotation, and Katie says your early favorite free agent signing wish list. So of course he's not a free agent. He is set to be a free agent next year. But in terms of the dream lineup and rotation, I mean, it just got me thinking. If I'm dreaming of Shohei Ohtani in the middle of the lineup and in the rotation. I mean, he accomplishes two things at once in that he could replace Carlos Rodon and he could be that big bat in the middle of the lineup. And then imagine if you would then go out and sign somebody as well, one of these impact position players, and you've got in the middle of your lineup. I mean, just dreaming, right? The question is your dream starting lineup. Imagine if you have Judge and Ohtani suddenly in the middle of your lineup. The interest in this team would be through the roof locally. I mean, this is what fans have been clamoring for. And if the Angels decide to trade him, the cost, while not nothing, it's just maybe not as high as you would think, given that it's only 1 year. And so while there are all these benefits I just mentioned, beyond just the production on the field, which is astronomical, the Angels have to face the reality that they're only guaranteed of that for one more season. And then can you risk letting him leave in free agency and getting no major return back for him in the position they're in? You have to think of it from their position, which is that they haven't been able to put together a winning team. They've got, a lot of obligations to Mike Trout and Anthony Rendon, both of whom are showing some signs of slowing down, specifically Rendon. I mean, Trout is still amazing, but he's been hurt more and more. Strikeout rate has gone up a little bit to somewhat concerning levels, but Rendon, I mean, he's been hurt and not nearly as productive as they had hoped in this mega deal that they gave to him. So when we look for comps, when we say Mookie Betts is a comp, and what the Dodgers gave up was Verdugo, Jeter Downs, a top 100 prospect, and Connor Wong, and they paid basically $50 million over 3 years, I think that a reasonable comp would be perhaps for Alex Verdugo. I kind of equate him a little bit. There's no perfect comp, but to Thairo Estrada. So again, like I mentioned, high floor, not necessarily a high ceiling. I don't think you're going to get star production out of Thairo Estrada, but you're getting a good player with years of team control. Different position, different types of players. Estrada's older, but still just 26 than Verdugo was. And Verdugo had 5 years of team control, and Estrada only has 4. So that's a little bit of a difference. Camilo Doval has 5 years of club control, but you're talking about a reliever, and it's a very different story, but a good one. So I don't know, like a good player on the Giants. I think Logan Webb is too much in terms of a comp, but somewhere in that good player, team control, youngish, pretty young. I mean, Doval and Estrada are like mid-20s. So that's my comp for Verdugo. And in terms of Jeter Downs, it's a little bit tough to find a perfect comp here for the Giants. But again, Downs was ranked 47th on Fangraph's top 100 list around the time he was traded. And for the Giants, it's kind of like Luis Matos territory. I don't think it's Kyle Harrison or Marco Luciano. You could make a case perhaps that Shohei Ohtani is better than Mookie Betts was at the time, even though Betts, again, was considered arguably the best player in baseball. I don't think he was, but he was in that conversation at the time. And so I don't know, maybe you say because of that, it is a Marco Luciano. But and Luis Matos, he's coming off a down year. And so I'm saying like last year's version of Luis Matos, coming off a good year, stock rising. That's who I'm kind of comparing to Jeter Downs. And then for Connor Wong, I threw out the name Brett Auerbach because kind of similar in that he's a catcher who can also play other positions and has promise, but not necessarily a top prospect. And then money. That's all it took. It's not a perfect comparison, but it's somewhat in the ballpark. Estrada, Luis Matos, Brett Auerbach, and then $50 million spread out over 3 years. That's what it took, roughly, from the Dodgers' perspective, to get Mookie Betts for only 1 year, but then they extended it. So, I mean, and the thing is, financially, there is a bad contract perhaps to take on from the Angels in this hypothetical, and it would be probably Anthony Rendon. The thing is, Rendon is owed $38.6 million per year each of the next 4 years. So it comes out to a total of, what is it, 100 and I have it somewhere, $154.3 million over 4 years. So it's not exactly the same. Price was owed $96 million over 3 years. But if you took on half of Anthony Rendon, I don't know. I believe in Anthony Rendon coming back and being good. So I'm not sure the Angels are in a position where they're like, yeah, let's give up Shohei Ohtani and Anthony Rendon. They would be getting big payroll relief on Rendon, and they could theoretically spend that now on some other players who aren't going to decline like Rendon has or have injury concerns. But I don't know how realistic any of this is. It's probably not. I mean, this is all fantasy land. I just want to keep making that clear. But there is money you could take on. And then you're also taking on the money owed to Shohei Ohtani, which is $30 million. But the Dodgers did the same. They took on Mookie Betts and the money he was going to be owed. So that's that. That's my comp. And it's just fun to think about. Again, the question that prompted this, I'm going off of this question. Dream lineup and starting rotation. And it's got Ohtani in it, in my dreams. So coming up in just a minute, we're going to get to more questions and answers. We're going to talk about the Rule 5 draft. The Giants have a lot of players to protect from the Rule 5 draft, so we'll get into that a little bit in just a second. But first, all right, as promised, more questions and answers. And I guess I want to just say I think I mostly answered the question in terms of dream starting lineup and rotation because I added Aaron Judge. If you've got, just think about it. You're asking me for my dream scenario. That's it. Fill around the edges all you want, but Ohtani and Judge, just imagine. It is a total dream. And they're not only great players, but they're just so huge physically. And just imagine those two back to back, one left, one right, just enormous power from both of them. Yeah, got me salivating a little bit when I was just thinking about that. But I do want to mention Farhan Zaidi has said that, obviously they've stated repeatedly they want to get younger and more athletic. And he is on record recently saying the way you get younger and more athletic is not necessarily through free agency because by definition, these guys have been around a while. Aaron Judge is going to be 31 in year one of a deal. And so for me, I have concerns about that. And so you're asking me for my dream, but part of what makes it perhaps not realistic, particularly with Judge, is that it's going to take 7-8 years. And you're talking about in year 7, he's 37. In year 8, he's 38. And that's a concern. So they're going to be out there on the trade market as well. Of course, Ohtani would be a trade. Not saying it's realistic, but again, I've looked around and I want to do a deep dive on who these trade candidates are to get impact up the middle position players, impact defensively at least, but they've had impact defenders and they've traded them. So, like Mauricio Dubon and Steven Duggar, for example, good defenders, but they didn't stick on the roster because I think they need them to defend but also hit, and those guys had trouble hitting. Look at Dubon's numbers with the Astros. Even though he's stuck on their roster all year, he did not hit at all for them. He is like a pure defense player right now. And Duggar has been since DFA'd multiple times. I think he's a free agent at this point. So yeah. Anyway, I've looked and there's not obvious targets for me. So we'll continue to look and put together a list as best we can. Next question I wanted to get to here comes from Ziggy, who says, Rule 5 draft still a thing? And the answer is yes. It did not happen last year because of the lockout. Lockout started like right before the Rule 5 draft was going to happen. Lockout finally ended 99 days later, and they just canceled the Rule 5 draft for 1 year. But it's going to happen again this year. And the Giants have a lot of players that they need to protect from the Rule 5 draft. Just as a refresher for those who aren't aware, the Rule 5 draft, basically, you become eligible if you've been in the minors for a while since you were drafted, basically. And you're only eligible for the Rule 5 draft if you're not on a 40-man roster. And what it means to be eligible for the Rule 5 draft is that other teams in the draft, which is in December, early December, can take you from the Giants, or the Giants can take somebody from another team. And the rule is you have to have that player on your major league roster all season long, or else you have to offer them back. And so teams, certain players are just slam dunks to be taken away. And so you have to protect them from this process by adding them to the 40-man roster prior to the Rule 5 draft. And so there's a deadline for this. It's in like mid-November, about a month from now. And the Giants will do this with a number of their players who are not yet on the 40-man, players who are eligible this year for the Rule 5 draft. And among those players, you've got Marco Luciano, slam dunk to be added to the 40-man in the offseason. You've got Luis Matos, I would imagine also a slam dunk. Maybe not, because of the, part of it is teams have to have these guys in the major leagues all season long. And if you're in kind of the low levels of the minors, you're not yet ready for the majors. And so you have to calculate the odds really of these players being taken. But I'm not the best at predicting which players will get protected, but I'm just going to mention some of the names who are eligible and would need to be protected, or else they're at risk for getting taken. So like I said, Luciano, Matos, Jairo Pomares, Will Wilson, Tristan Beck, Tyler Fitzgerald, Luis Toribio, and Hunter Bishop are among the many names that are eligible for the Rule 5 draft. So yes, it's still happening. And yes, the Giants have some guys they'll have to add. And the thing about a 40-man roster is you can't have more than 40 guys on it. And so when you have to add a bunch of young players who are not yet even factoring in at the major league level, it can get tight. And so, when you talk about trades in the offseason, it does sometimes make sense to trade away players you've had to add to your 40-man who aren't yet factoring in at your major league level. And that's what they did in the Chris Bryant trade. They traded away, I'm blanking on his name, but they traded away somebody on the 40-man who was in the lower levels of the minors, because it kind of creates a crunch issue when you have too many of these players. So anyway, next question. Matt in Maine says, did you miss pitchers hitting at all? It seems like a lot of Giants fans were upset about the DH at the start of the season, but by year's end, no one noticed. Do you think next year's rule changes will have the same effect on the fans? So, good question. The thing for me about this question is that the DH came to the NL in 2020, and I felt that way at the time. I was kind of freaked out about it. And then it happened, and I got used to it, and I actually liked it by the end of the year because the Giants hit well, remember. And I think that pitchers hitting or not hitting had a lot to do with that. And then in 2021, we got to go back, and then the pitchers were just so bad. The Giants pitchers specifically were historically bad at hitting in 2021. And so I actually have a different take on this, is that I liked it in 2020, but I didn't like it as much in 2022 for whatever reason. I can't really explain to you why this is. But I did miss pitchers hitting in 2022. There's something about being able to kind of navigate through a lineup and knowing where that pitcher spot is. And as when your team is on defense and pitching, you can kind of get out of innings by navigating the bottom of the lineup strategically. And so just having nothing but bats 1 through 9, I don't know. I just kind of missed the old style a little bit. But I certainly didn't like the way the Giants pitchers hit in 2021, couldn't bunt, couldn't hit, just were automatic outs and tons of swings and misses, just non-competitive in the box. So I don't like that. But the old days where pitchers could do stuff with the bat, I do find myself missing that a little bit, but I'm not going to get too worked up about it because the rule is here to stay, I'm certain. So best to just accept it, I guess. And in terms of this year's rule changes, I don't know, are people upset about it? I'm super stoked on a lot of these changes, specifically the pitch clock. I think it's going to be the best change we've seen in baseball in a long time, if not ever, because the pace has just slowed. It's just about crisp pace, keep the action going. And that's going to make a major change, I think, on the product and just keep it crisp. And it's going to be great, in my opinion. And we'll see how the shift ban goes. I know a lot of people, I think, like that. So, yeah, I think eventually people will really like the rule changes coming in 2023. I really do. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. Now make your second listen to Locked On MLB podcast. MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and unique perspective on every team and the biggest stories around the league. Follow the #1 daily league-wide podcast, Locked On MLB, on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. Thank you so much for listening again. Have a great weekend. You are now Locked On Giants.